Hello and welcome! I'm Michelle Anderson, the founder of Clarinet Mentors. Today I want to give you a great tool to help you improve your tone on clarinet. There's a resource that goes along with this video that would be very handy for you to look at. So you'll see a link in the write-up just below this video to the Clarinet Mentors Tone Checklist. Now this is actually video 2 in the series from the checklist. If you haven't seen video 1, you're going to find that one helpful too, and I'll put a link to that in the write-up as well. But this one does stand alone. My thought was that it would be handy if you had a checklist of all the different things you need to think about to help produce the best tone possible. And then I gave you a quick overview of each of those things. So on the checklist, you'll also see references to other YouTube videos that go into more detail on each of these items. So you might be going through here and find that one of the items I talk about really stands out as something you feel you might need more help with. Well, then you can look at the more detailed video. But I'm going to explain each of them in today's video as well. So we're starting with section 2 on the checklist, which is body position. Now sometimes we don't really realize how much our body position influences tone, but it really does. So let's look at each item on the checklist, and what I want you to do is just evaluate yourself and see if you are doing these good habits that are on the list, or if you might have a bad habit that's interfering with your sound. The first thing on the checklist is it says, head up, question mark. Well, that's a question for you. Do you play with your head up and looking forward as if you're talking to someone? So right now I'm facing you, in conversation with you, my head is up. I'm not sure why, but many clarinetists have a habit of when they put the clarinet into their mouth, they look down. And the weird thing is, my guess is 80% of them have no awareness that they're doing this at all. You might be doing this without being aware of it. And really the only way for you to find out, I think, is video yourself or have a friend sit beside you. It's a little easier to see from the side. Notice if you do this. My head is up, my head is up, my head is down. It happens so easily. How does this affect your tone? Well, actually quite a bit. It has a lot to do with how our air goes into the instrument and interacts with the mouthpiece. So what I want to play for you is just 4 simple notes. My high G, A, B, C. I'll do it with my head up once, and then I'll put my head down. I'm not going to change anything else, but I want you to hear the difference in tone quality that that one change makes. Big difference. Many people who play with their head down will find that their highest notes kind of wimp out, they sound a little obnoxious, they sound loud, and they're not sure why. Could be as simple as that. I guess the way to fix it is maybe even look at something higher up in the room. For me, for example, I have a light that's up above the camera. If I look at that light and then try and bring the clarinet to me and play, this would be a way for me to start playing with my head a little higher up than I'm accustomed to. Big one for you to work on. And again, there's a link for more details that you can follow on the checklist. Number 2 on today's checklist is your clarinet at the optimum angle. Well, notice I said optimum angle without telling you that it's 37.82 degrees. It's because it's different for every person. Everyone's equipment is different. Everyone's ideal sound is a little bit different. My bias tends to be a more classical sound. You'll find if you're doing a lot of jazz or klezmer that you're going to want to hold your clarinet out further than if you're playing classical. So it also depends what music you're playing. But for today's discussion, it's how does the angle of your clarinet affect tone? Well, quite a bit. So part of the reason changing our head affects tone is that, in fact, by lifting our head up, if we keep our clarinet in the same place, we're actually changing the angle the clarinet makes to our face. If I play with my head down a lot and lifted my clarinet and head up together, I might realize that it would be as if I was holding my clarinet almost straight out. For most classical tone, this far out is not going to sound so good. You'll certainly see some of the great jazz players do play out a bit more. It's a little bit more flexible, bendy, brighter sound. So it depends what music you're going to play. You've discovered that for yourself. What you need to do is experiment with the sound you want. Again, for a more classical tone, which is what a lot of community bands and community orchestras model after, with most people, It's actually inside of their knees. If your knees were up against a wall, your bell would fit in there. For many people, it's right at that point. For some people, it's even closer in. And again, I could test that. I could start with my clarinet deliberately too far in. Yeah, sounds okay, but I'm kind of pressing the reed with my bottom lip. Not so good. I'm going to push it out a little bit. That feels better. Now I'll go out to the end of my knees. Not bad. For me, that starts to get a little bright sounding. I'll go a bit further. Now, I'm not liking that sound so much, but if I were playing something more jazzy, I might prefer it at that angle. Be great for that kind of effect. It starts to get a little too bright for my classical playing. If I go out further, don't like it at all. And then probably most of you wouldn't like that sound. So it's a matter of experimenting. For me, I think I pull my clarinet in a bit closer than is ideal for most people because that's what fits my mouth shape. For most of my students, like I said, their bell is either even with their knees or even slightly inside of that point. So you need to experiment, see what gives you the best tone, and then check it off our tone checklist. Item number 3 under body position is simply what we do with our tongue inside of our mouth. And I talked about this a little bit at the end of the section 1 video on embouchure, because tongue is also part of the embouchure. How we hold our tongue inside our mouth when we play, whether it's sitting high in our mouth or low in our mouth, is often referred to as voicing. And voicing has a huge impact on tone. For classical clarinet sound, generally speaking, we want our tongue quite high in our mouth, arched and high. And we get that by saying the word he. Especially the h sound helps us to bring the sides of our tongue up high. He. That's not necessarily where our tongue likes to hang out. In fact, I think it likes to rest on the bottom of our mouth, which is ha. So you can experiment with that. Again, the high C, thumb and register key, is such a reactable note. It's a really fun one to use if you want to experiment with voicing. I can think of going he, so this is representing my tongue while I'm playing high C, and you'll hear a radical difference in tone. In fact, I'll let my hand represent what my tongue is doing. So not only does it affect pitch, it affects tone. And you could experiment with that. You can also close your lips around the instrument and literally speak he, trying to bring our corners in. That starts to train your embouchure to have nice round corners with your tongue high. And then, experiment with moving it up and down until you can get it up in that position. Again, there's a link to a video with more details, but this is a very important part of good clarinet tone. Next on the checklist is simply posture. And again, I'm just going to give you the quick version of it today. We do want to be sitting up straight when we play the clarinet, whether we're sitting or standing. When we stand, our body naturally goes into a great position for playing. When we sit, we do tend to slouch a little bit. And so there are many theories out there on how you should hold your feet and how you should sit. I'll tell you my favorite one is simply that from the hips up, when we're sitting, our body should be exactly the same as it is when we're standing. And when we slouch, this space between our bottom rib, which for me is right here, and my hip, which is right here, when we slouch, that area squishes together. My voice actually is having trouble talking when I'm squished over like this. When I lift myself up, all of a sudden the muscles that support my air and my blowing can work much better. So for me, it's maximizing that space between ribs and hips. When I'm standing, that space is quite big. So if I were to sit just by kind of lowering my body into the chair using just my legs, I'd be in the perfect position for clarinet. We don't actually sit like that, but that would be the idea that we want. So we're lifting our ribs up. I also like to think of our neck. And for me, I imagine we have a hook right at the back of our collar, lifting ourselves up so that our spine is straight. We don't want to be rigid. So I've got my head up, my ribs up. and then I want everything else just to hang loosely from there. Now, if I were to slouch and play, which many people do, you'll hear it in your sound. Let me take that same passage, G, A, B, C. I'll play it sitting up straight, and then I'm going to slouch a bit and listen to the difference in sound. So I was trying to sit up at the end of my slouchy example because boy did I find it hard to play. In fact, I was stunned at how much my air was squished and inhibited and not working. And yet most people slouch a little bit without realizing it. So don't slouch when you play. You can slouch in rehearsal if the conductor's talking, you can lean back, relax, but when it's time to play, scoot yourself to the front edge of your chair, roll your belly button forward, and be ready to play with your ribs lifted up. It really makes a big difference to producing the best tone that you possibly can. All right, that's a mini lesson on some of the most important things with body posture. And what I'll also say is that you want to have your shoulders and your arms really, really relaxed. If I'm tense here, then I tend to be tense in my throat and the air can't come out as easily as it should. So that's not a good thing. So when we're thinking about posture, we're upright, but then very, very relaxed. So I hope this is helpful to you. In fact, I know it's helpful suggestions. My goal for you is to take the checklist and just evaluate each one of these things. As I said, this is part 2 of the videos on the checklist, and I'm going to be putting out part 3 next here on my YouTube channel. If you want to be one of the first to hear about it, make sure you're in my Clarinet Mentors community. It's totally free to join. You go to www.learnclarinetnow.com and just enter your name and email address. About every 2 or 3 weeks, I send out a newsletter with a video like today's, and I'll share some of my favorite pointers to help make clarinet playing more easy. I also put in recommendations of reeds and ligatures and mouthpieces and music and concerts and things that I think you as a clarinetist would be interested in. I also look forward to your comments. If you have any ideas or questions about today's video, just put it in the comments box below this video and I'll answer it. I go into YouTube about once a week and answer your questions, and I love hearing from you. Thank you so much for watching today's video, and keep an eye out for section 3 coming soon.